Welcome to the second of a two-part CLIDE Awards Showcase webinar series. My name is Carolyn Horner. I'm a senior planner here at the North Central Texas Council of Governments, and I'm going to be your moderator and host this morning. Today's Celebrating Leadership and Development Excellence, or CLIDE Awards Showcase, will feature 3 of the 9 2021 CLIDE Award projects. This showcase will provide a great opportunity for the region to learn more about these award-winning projects, including presentations from the cities of Farmers Branch, Fort Worth, and Salina. Before we start with the program, I'd like to spend a few minutes providing some background on the Center of Development Excellence, the CLIDE Award Program, and the principles of development excellence. The Center of Development Excellence is a program here at the COG that has existed since about 2001. So in early 2021, we launched a new, refreshed Center of Development Excellence website to serve as a regional resource that supports sustainable and efficient growth in our North Texas region. We invite you to peruse the site and check back periodically as we continue to build the resources and information available. I will spend a few minutes at the end of today's presentation, if we have enough time, to cover more of the website and resources available in a little bit more detail. The CLIDE Awards Program was created in 2003 to encourage innovative development projects and practices that will help accommodate the expected growth and ensure sustainable North Texas for generations to come. The CLIDE program does this by recognizing private and public development and projects that exemplify the principles of development excellence. On the screen, you'll see where we have a storybook map that highlights our winners going all the way back to 2003. On each tab, you'll see the different years available. Selected by a distinguished panel of national jurors, the 2021 projects and programs exemplify the North Central Texas region's principles of development excellence, which outline a vision for sustainable, livable communities in North Texas. To be considered for a CLIDE Award, a project must exemplify one or more of the COG's principles of development excellence and must receive a unanimous vote from our jury of nationally recognized experts. The 12 principles, as reflected on the screen, show our region's collective values as affirmed by the COG Executive Board. As you can see on the screen, we have 12 that range from development diversity and efficient growth to healthy communities and effective implementation. They represent sound, time-tested ideas that we can apply to varied and changing circumstances. The 5 CLIDE Award categories are new development, which recognizes new developments constructed on previously undeveloped sites; redevelopment, recognizing those developments that reuse or rebuild existing structures; special development are projects that exemplify only a limited number, maybe only 1 or 2 of the principles, but which are outstanding in their promotion; raising public awareness, which is a recognition of an organization or individual for educating the public; and public policy and planning, recognizing a local government or public-private partnership for implementing a program or policy that facilitates and promotes various aspects of these principles of development excellence. The goal is to promote as many as possible, but we understand not all 12 will apply to every project. So let's get into our presentations. We do have 3 today. Our first presentation is by John Land, the Deputy City Manager for the City of Farmers Branch. John has been the Deputy City Manager since 2016, with previous positions in the city as Managing Director of Operations and Special Projects Manager. John, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that you can start your presentation on Open Farmers Branch.
Well, thank you so much for the CLIDE Awards and for this opportunity. This was kind of a unique opportunity for our city when, kind of faced with the pandemic and receiving stimulus funds. We had the CARES Act, and there was a lot of concern in our community, and I'm sure yours. And we went out and talked to as many businesses as we could. As you mentioned, I used to be our economic development director, and we have a retention program. So we had a lot of information about companies that were currently here. And in this process, we contacted over 1,000 businesses, not all of those personally, but via email, phone calls, texts, and just stopping out. And the mayor and I spent a day just going out and sitting across from small business owners and trying to understand where their pain was and what would keep them open. The great fear is we're going to have mass closings and folks out of work and people that have just labored to make our community great. And we wanted to find a way to try to be available for them. So before I get too far into that, I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge that today is Flo Rider's birthday. It's kind of a big day for me personally, and I'm sure it is for you. So I wanted to acknowledge that because I'm sure that would be one of the questions is somebody going to recognize Flo Rider? So Open Farmers Branch. We have formed a committee of our city council, a couple city council representatives, our mayor, myself, our city manager, finance director, and economic development director, and we all kind of each had assignments and came back with intel. And we understood what we could spend the money on, but there was a few things that we felt like could be challenged. The easy ones: public safety, police, fire. The tourism industry was really hurting. Our hotels were essentially closed. They were at 10% occupancy, so we knew they were hurting. We have a performing arts center, our Firehouse Theater. They were essentially shut down. We had community organizations that we typically support, like Mentorcrest Services, and we also are partnering. We have a partnership with a clinic in our community for our employees, and we were trying to help them get rapid COVID testing so we could do that right in the hub of our town. And then small business assistance, we contracted with our chambers to try to help get the word out with cleaning supplies, marketing, PPE, but probably the most creative one was this parklet program. One of the things that became clear to us is restaurants that had patio dining and socially distanced to-go options were winning in this economy. And we heard that over and over again as we talked to property owners that had strip centers in other communities. They said, "Hey, I've got another restaurant. They're doing great, but they have patio dining." And we knew this is something that we needed to get behind. So we worked with the county on trying to get approvals to do that. And once we did, we got busy going out and having appointments with various mom and pop restaurants. We weren't really focused on like the Applebee's of the world. We were really focused on owner occupied, mom and pop. This is my business. So here's kind of the project timeline. We had done a lot of the site work in advance, but once we got approval to do that, we followed up with folks on day one. Do you want to do this? We had to get approval from the property owner. Just because the restaurant wanted to doesn't necessarily mean the strip center owner did. We had to get approval from the property owner. We had to get approval from the operator. And then we had to understand their business, what made them unique, and try to tailor this towards them. We went through design and review. I know a number of y'all are planners, and one of the issues that we faced initially is parklets aren't technically allowed. So how do we get around that? We created essentially a 120-day temporary permit, provided that it still complied. Some of the things clearly didn't, with setbacks, taking away some space in front of some of the restaurants. One of them was built in a kind of an easement that crossed over a little bit, but we got a 120-day approval. And then we also got our building official. We wanted to make sure these were built safely. So just because they were initially thought to be temporary, we wanted to make sure that those were built soundly. The hope was these would be permanent. And as it turns out, they were wildly successful, and they are now permanent. We've made those legal and conforming. And then the opening, and we wanted to have some level of celebration to give people a reason to come out and say, we have to-go options. There's windows that have been installed. There's drive-through lanes, or there's outdoor patio. And then over that 60 days, just continuing to get feedback. Are people using them? Are the property owners satisfied with this? Are the restaurateurs satisfied with this? Are there any safety concerns from our fire department or the police department getting called out? Fortunately, we had none of those issues. So again, going through our planning department, we got essentially a 120-day kind of temporary permit, and then the building official had to review plans, go out, do a site inspection, make sure that things were installed correctly. We hired Team Better Block, who eventually merged with WGI to do this because we did not have the manpower or the expertise. We knew Team Better Block did. and they had had success doing parklets in other communities. We had actually talked to them about some things in the past about doing pop-up patios. This was obviously a little bit more substantial than that. So here's some kind of behind the scenes pictures. Essentially this is just a mom and pop Cuquitas restaurant in the heart of Farmers Branch, a longtime city resident, and just going out, painting the parking lots, putting some stamping on it, just a ton of assembly. We didn't have a shop necessarily for them, but you can see a ton of work had to be done behind the scenes, and we had to move quickly while we had support and the iron was hot. There was a lot of risk because not everybody was in favor of this. Here's a quote from our mayor: "If the first patio succeeds, we'll succeed with many of our other restaurants in Farmers Branch, and I think that'll be a blessing for the entire community." We weren't sure if they would work. We weren't sure if people would, if we built it, would they come? We didn't know if they would be subject to vandalism. Fortunately, we didn't really experience any of that. So we went out throughout the community, again, targeting owner-occupied, mom and pop, not franchises, and we identified, throughout the community where we had a fit. They were small businesses, approval from the property owners, essentially fairly spread out, and a place where we could make a difference. We didn't have an unlimited budget, so these are the ones that made the most sense for us. The first one we did was Cuquitas. And you can see Elizabeth's quote: "As the first recipient of Open Farmers Branch, we couldn't be happier. The parklet provided an invaluable outdoor dining space that allows our businesses to thrive during these trying times. Thanks to the mayor and the council for putting this program in place. We couldn't do it without you." So this is what it looked like on day one. And then here's what it looked like upon completion. And then at their grand reopening. Then here's a night shot. So Cuquitas has amazing margaritas. So because of my commitment to the city, I made sure that I was out there frequently to make sure that everything was working properly and that they had a good crowd in the evenings. The next one was Nueva Leon. They've been in Farmers Branch for over 20 years. One of the things that we did that was unique for them is we put in a pass-through window. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but we put in a pass-through window here so people did not have to come into the store, and we moved their bar from the very back to the side here and allowed this pass-through window. And then on the side, we also created kind of a to-go option. But again, unique to their personality, they had input on colors and schemes. This is what it looks like at night. The manager told us that they had more people stop by that saw this when they were driving by at night and go, "I forgot you were here," or "I never knew you were here. I drive by this all the time." And the funny thing was, a lot of people would come because they had a patio, but they would sit outside and it might be a little bit warm. They said, "Hey, is it okay if we move inside?" But it gave people that sense of, I have an option of being outside, socially distanced, and I feel safe. But once they actually got into the space, a number of them would move inside. Here's Odd Muse Brewing. So here's the one I was talking about that was built in an easement along Spring Valley, which is a reasonably very busy thoroughfare. We wanted to create an outdoor beer garden for them. And they had recently opened, they were killing it, and then this happened and it was about to close their business. And we were able to go out and create something that's really unique. And one great story, there's a restaurateur who was looking at opening a restaurant in 2 neighboring communities. We were not on their radar. And this individual has a kid that goes to a private school in Farmers Branch, happened to be driving down Spring Valley after picking her up and saw this outdoor patio and couldn't believe it because, "I didn't know there was a brewery here. And how in the world did you get approval to get this patio?" And they went inside and talked with the owner, Bobby Diaz, and they said, "Hey, the city came to us with this idea." And they went through and got it approved, and they built it on stimulus funds, and they couldn't believe it. He called us and said, "Hey, this is the kind of community we're looking at partnering with, and there is literally a printing business in that same parking lot that's directly across from them. They've decided to take down that space, retrofit it, and if we would build a patio for them." And this is a spinoff of Lockhart's Barbecue. It's the same folks as Lockhart's Barbecue. It's called Crossbuck. So that was a fantastic story for us that someone drove by and saw that And this put us on their radar, and it ended up with them deciding to invest in our community. Spicy Zest is kind of a very non-traditional restaurant as well. There wasn't a ton of space to work with, and they wanted something that had a real different feel from anything else that we did. So we ended up putting in a palapa and some kind of fun lights outside. And it's another one of those situations where just the fact that there was something different outside, lit at night, colorized, that it started drawing people in from that community that didn't realize they were there. Some of them sat outside, some of them came inside, but it was like, wow, what is this? This looks really fun. I want to try this out. And then Cadillac Barbecue has been a great success story for us, absolutely started by accident. And we had a real limited space to work with. So we ended up creating kind of a covered patio across their parking lot. And as you can see, it's been wildly successful. And Cadillac is, if you haven't eaten there, this will do yourself a favor. This is the best barbecue I've ever eaten, and I have eaten a lot of barbecue. And the Native Coffee, this was a coffee shop that's kind of an outreach of a church. And now that the coffee shop is broken off from the church and it's a standalone operation, this one really came out well. We were really proud of that. And again, this was one of the things that kept them open. They made this big step that we're going to open the shop on our own and pull away and be a private business. And this has made a huge difference. Some statistics. In total, it was 9,800 square feet of parklets. It created 315 new seats. We consumed 20 parking spaces in doing that. 150 gallons of paint, 6,300 linear feet of wood, 54 cubic feet of decomposed granite, 3,500 screws, 2 palapas, 4 canvas covers, and 5 gallons of lemonade from Cuquitas for the workers who were laboring in the hot sun. So here's kind of the return on investment. That's something that we spend a lot of time on when we make decisions. Granted, it was CARES funding. It was $175,000 when you look at the design, the architectural, engineering, labor, materials, and so forth. It created 315 seats, and statistically, about each ticket's worth about $25. And if we can have a turnover of four a day, that's $31,500 per day. That's less than a week in payback in actual dollars. But if we're looking at it in terms of sales tax, the city's portion, then that would be about 278 days to get that back. So feedback from owners from Nueva Leon, since the patio was put in, our revenue increased by 90%. It's been great. More customers feel safe being outside than inside. And I'm happy and grateful to have a patio in the future. The city and Better Block did a great job. I'm just grateful. Spicy Zest, this has been the best marketing we've ever done. And Cuquitas, as one of the first recipients, we couldn't be happier. The parklet provides invaluable outdoor space that allows our businesses to thrive during these trying times. We had a very emotional city council meeting where we invited some of the recipients to come up and tell their story. And I mean, these are folks, Maggie, the owner of Nueva Leon, started there as a waitress, and she worked her way up to the point that she could buy the business that she started out as a waitress. And to hear her talk about how close they were to closing, and this was her life savings. It's a family business. All of her family works there. And for them to say, the next day, our business increased 90%. We knew we were going to make it. We're still here. You talk about people that are fired up to be in our community. They know we were with them in their toughest days, and they've been with us to this point. This was a great marriage for us. And just kind of in closing, Flo Rida is one of my favorite artists, and I love the song My House. So this was kind of our house. And this is how we do things in Farmers Branch, and this is how we kept our house open. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and I will welcome your questions at the end of our program.
So thank you very much, John. Our next showcase item has 3 presenters. Katrina Newsom and Corey Becht are senior planners with the City of Fort Worth's Planning and Data Analytics Department. And Dorothy DeBose is a healthcare executive with experience as a vice president of patient services. Dorothy is active in her community and currently serves on the JPS Health Network Hospital Board of Managers, and the Como Neighborhood Advisory Council. So ladies, just let me know as we go through if I am not keeping up with you guys on the slides for your presentation on the Como Sunset Heights Neighborhood Empowerment Zone Strategic Plan and Design Guidelines.
All right, well, thank you very much, Carolyn. My name is Patrina Newton, and as Carolyn mentioned, I'm one of three presenters. First, I just want to say thank you to COG for the CLIDE Award for this project. And, you know, it's an honor to be here presenting today. This is a great opportunity to learn about a lot of projects. The Farmers Markers Project was really interesting, a lot of good information from that. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. We got quite a few slides to get through. A little bit about the city's Neighborhood Empowerment Zone program. It was created, I want to say around the early 2000s, and it's intended to promote affordable housing, economic development, and quality services in Fort Worth Central City neighborhoods. The type of incentives that we offer: municipal property tax abatements, fee waivers, and release of city liens. So these type of incentives have been instrumental in serving to bring about revitalization in several of our Central City neighborhoods. And it's an opportunity for stakeholders to work with the city to develop a neighborhood strategic plan. We have several NEZ designations in Fort Worth, and a few of them have gone through the process of creating a strategic plan, including the Como neighborhood. A little bit about the NEZ designation criteria. So for an area to be considered, the population should be no greater than 6,000 or no larger than 1.5 square miles, and it must be at least 75% community development block grant eligible, or 50% within what we call our Central City, and that's roughly within the loop, Loop 820. Also, there are some state requirements. It must meet the criteria for a reinvestment zone pursuant to the Texas Tax Code, Chapter 312. This is the same policy that applies to tax abatements. And it must have housing and economic development opportunities. Next slide, please. Okay, the Como neighborhood, a little bit about its location. It is in southeast Fort Worth. Southwest Fort Worth, sorry about that. West Fort Worth is a thriving area. This is where Fort Worth has the cultural district. Some of the prominent museums are located in this part of Fort Worth. So Como is about a 1 square mile neighborhood that's located in West Fort Worth. The background about the Como neighborhood: it is a historic neighborhood. It dates back to the 1900s when African Americans began moving to the area. During its heyday, during the 1940s and 1960s, the population was steadily increasing, and it was pretty much self-sufficient with its businesses, churches, schools, and so it was like its own little small town within a large city. However, by the time 1960 came around, the population began to decline. And if you know the history here in America, you know this is around the time of the Civil Rights Movement, when other areas across the country began opening up to African Americans. So there were some who chose to move to other parts of Fort Worth, you know, just venturing out like all people do. Due to its population decline, one of the negative factors was over time you began to see the closure of some of the small mom and pop businesses. Some of those businesses are coming back, but it is not where it was in the 1950s, where you had many businesses in that neighborhood. Currently, Como's population is more diverse. It originally started primarily and historically has been an African American neighborhood. However, with the increase of the Hispanic population all over the country, we're beginning to see more diversity in the Como neighborhood. So currently, African Americans and Hispanics comprise the majority of the residents. So a little bit about the indicators of distress. We saw this when we started the planning process in late 2014, and there has been some improvement, but roughly a lot of things are still about the same. So this is the latest information that we have from the census and other sources. The median household income is just a little over 18,000. So that's falling in that 0 to 30% area median income for this area. The poverty rate is about 41%. So that's pretty high. And unemployment is about 14%. There is a concentration of vacant and abandoned houses. And this is when we started the planning project. Currently, we're seeing a lot more infill that has been developed. Some of the houses that could not be rehabbed have been demolished. So this area is improving. As well as that last bullet, we are beginning to see more investment. So going back to the planning phase, we started in late 2014, and this was roughly a 3-year planning phase. The plan was adopted in 2017. And then we began working or finalizing the design guidelines, which were later adopted in January 2020. Now, the plan is referenced in the city's comprehensive plan. So once we adopt the plan, we usually reference it in the city's comprehensive plan. Next slide. So the strategic plan proposes a comprehensive, holistic approach intended to revitalize the Como neighborhood. And I'd like to add also, the plan was set up with a focus on a grassroots initiative. The community is a very proud community, and they want to be involved in making decisions about their community. So we kind of drafted the plan so that it is more, it can be driven by the leadership and the stakeholders in Como. The plan also builds on existing assets and strengths in the Como neighborhood. It is a historic neighborhood, has a lot of civic groups, including the churches. They are very active and a lot of different things. So we wanted to build upon those assets. The plan outlines a vision, goals, and a plan framework to implement the plan. And that's currently what we're working on with the Como leadership. Next slide. It was extensive community engagement over that roughly 3-year period. We had workshops, we had several meetings, and then we began working with an advisory committee. And as you can see here, had very good attendance at a lot of these meetings, in addition to doing polling and surveys. Next slide. The recommendations, essentially it's 5 major recommendation categories following in the development category, neighborhood focused economic development, and that's essentially the corridor in the neighborhood, Horn Street, housing, also livability, what we're calling livability enhancements, and that's infrastructure, things of that nature, and also capacity building. So during the planning phase, we introduced to the stakeholders a couple of new zoning classifications that they embrace. We wanted to introduce mixed use, especially along Horn Street. As you can see, it's circled in black, it's a pinkish color. So this is intended to help facilitate that small business development along Horn Street. Back in the heyday, this is where a lot of those small businesses were located on Horn Street. So the area had a form-based code to the north, which was part of the Camp Bowie form-based code, which is a mixed-use type zoning category. We wanted to extend that further down Horn Street to take advantage of that so that new buildings would be closer to the curb line. It would promote pedestrian center type development. We also introduced urban residential to the neighborhood. So this is higher density, primarily residential with a pedestrian focus. Next slide, please. These are some of the existing conditions. So this is the north part of Horn Street. So this is an area where we did extend that zoning, that form-based code. And the next slide will show what a vision of this entrance into the neighborhood could look like. So the zoning is in place. And I'll talk about it in a few minutes. We're going to have a streetscape project that is going to bring the pedestrian amenities to that streetscape. And Fort Worth is a growing city, so the market is beginning to, we feel that there is a market for this type of development in the neighborhood. Next slide. So the neighborhood focused economic development, as I mentioned, is primarily focusing on Horn Street. This is where back in the day, a lot of those businesses were located. The goal is to create a vibrant business district with neighborhood serving restaurants. The strategies, again, focusing on Horn Street, entrepreneurial development, and then looking at a business district organization. Next slide, please. So this is the red line is Horn Street in the neighborhood. And as you can see, Camp Bowie is on the north side and Vickery Boulevard is on the south side. What we saw during the planning phase is sometimes Horn Street is used as a cut-through street. So people may be coming along Vickery, and for some reason they decide they don't want to go to Bryan Irving, which is a major street to the west. They decide they want to cut through on Horn Street to get to Camp Bowie and go north. So we oftentimes saw traffic moving at a very high speed in that neighborhood. And there is a school, the school zone is on Horn Street. So one of the objectives of this Complete Streets project is to slow the traffic down on Horn Street and to make that school zone safe. We were fortunate to receive an award from North Central Texas Council of Government. Initially, it was about 7.8 million. That has been increased to 9.2 million. We utilized our new program utilizing transportation development credits, which serves as a local match. That's always been a challenge for Fort Worth, is coming up with that local match for grants. So utilizing the transportation development credits solved that problem. So some of the potential project elements for Complete Streets is wider sidewalks, bike lanes, redesigned lanes, maybe you have a turn lane, a center turn lane, pedestrian safety and comfort features such as crosswalks, street trees, pedestrian lighting, etc. And again, we want to make that school zone safer. Next slide, please. This is an example of a street cross-section of what could take place. The city is getting very close to finalizing its negotiations with the selected design firm. And so we're hoping to start this project soon, start the design phase. But this is just one example of what a complete street project could look like on Horn Street. And then these are some other examples, potential improvements. The pictures at the top show the existing conditions, and as you can see, we have some obsolete type of infrastructure, old sidewalks, which do not have ADA ramps. We've got some of the street is a little old and worn. So we want to make improvements in those areas. We want to introduce pedestrian lights. And some of these images that you see below, these are in other parts of the city of Fort Worth, specifically in some of our urban villages, which are designed for pedestrian-oriented type development. You see some of the images with the street trees, street lights, etc. Okay, and then as I mentioned, the Como neighborhood is a historic neighborhood. It has a lot of history, and that's one of the objectives of the community, is to retain its history and to showcase its history. So we feel that a corridor identity, this is a great place to do that with banners, etc. So on Horn Street, it doesn't have much of identity at this point. So here you see a view of it looking, I believe that's a north view at the north entrance. So we want to bring about some improvements to help bring about a sense of place for this corridor to help it achieve its own identity. The city, as well as the Como neighborhood, has been working with Fort Worth Public Art, and we're going to continue to work with them in pursuing this particular objectives. Next slide. Jumping to the housing. When we went through the planning phase, the Como community was very clear about what they want with their housing. They would like to remain primarily a single family residential neighborhood. They do have a couple of apartments right now. I think it's actually 3, and they're open to more higher density development in appropriate places, but primarily they want to build up their single family residential stock. So this particular goal is intended to do that, bring in quality new single family affordable infill housing. So some of the strategies is to look at maybe establishing a housing coalition to work with developers who are coming into the neighborhood. Habitat for Humanity has been a great partner in this neighborhood and has built a large number of single family homes. Next slide, please. So when we look at the single family permits over the years, we go back to around 2001, and as you can see, there was a decline. There was very minimal investment, say roughly in that 2001 until about maybe about 2014. And then around 2014, or a little earlier, that's when Habitat for Humanity began working in the neighborhood and other developers began coming in. So as you can see, there's been a steady rise roughly around that 2014, 2015 with single family permits. Now, currently this year, we got about 30 permits as of earlier this month. And that's kind of on track with what we saw in 2020, which had a total of 48 permits. So a lot of new single family homes are being built in the neighborhood. A lot of those vacant lots now have new infill housing. And so things are moving forward. Next slide, please. The livability enhancements. This is primarily focused on things such as public, the parks in the neighborhood, the infrastructure, etc. So since the planning phase, we've seen a lot of improvements in this area. There's a new Como Community Center. There's been some roadway improvements, things of that nature. And there have been some work as it relates to the adult job training, but not at the level where we're beginning to see a change in some of those statistics, but that will pick up in the future. Next slide. So these are just some images of some of the improvements that have come to Como since 2017. This is a new Como Community Center. It's one of the largest community centers, I understand, in the city of Fort Worth. Has a lot of great amenities. It opened right before COVID hit, so it has not been used extensively. I think it was closed during COVID last year, but it is currently open. The city also has installed new sidewalks and street lights around Lake Como Park. And Como was the recipient of this year's Neighborhood Improvement Strategy program, where the city is investing about $3.1 million in the Como neighborhood for various improvements dealing with street improvements, public safety issues, etc. And the Como community is working very closely with the city on identifying the type of improvements that they want the money to be spent on. So this slide is talking about building neighborhood capacity. Como already has capacity. As I mentioned earlier, they're a very active community. They have a lot of organizations. The churches are very active out there. And so this is just intended to build upon the things that they currently have in place and to help strengthen that. The Como Neighborhood Advisory Council has been in place, I believe, since the 1970s. So we made suggestions on maybe setting up some subcommittees to focus in on some particular areas. Como has also, since the planning phase, created a 501c3 nonprofit community-based organization. It's getting started. They are working with their partners on that. So we're looking forward to some great things happening with the nonprofit. Next slide, please. And in the plan, we recommend under the implementation is to track it. So we have an implementation matrix and schedule. So some of these are, we've seen some completions. This particular image that you see is on the housing goal, and there has been a lot of infill housing. And then with the nonprofit that has been created, we're hoping some of these other recommendations will be pursued. Along with the implementation, we have some benchmarks that we're hoping in the future to take a look at those benchmarks that we identified during the planning phase and to look at the data and see, you know, the progress. And so we recommend that we do that every 3 to 5 years. Since the neighborhood was identified for the Neighborhood Improvement Strategy Program, our neighborhood development office has done a lot of that work now. And so we haven't seen much movement in the data since we started the planning phase. So we may look at doing, you know, a whole scale type of assessment around year 4, year 5. Next slide, please. Okay, I want to turn it over to Corey, and she's going to cover the design guidelines component of the plan.
Thanks, Patrina. So the design guidelines were created to conserve the valuable characteristics of the neighborhood that the community felt were the most important. And it also to facilitate new development, but also encouraging the existing neighborhood to continue to have pride in their neighborhood. And the design guidelines were part of the NEZ strategic plan, as Patrina explained earlier. And in order to get NEZ certification to have the incentives, you had to meet the design guidelines. Next slide. The design guideline components were based off of setbacks, building massing, landscaping, driveway, garages, roofs and windows, and porches and entries. So the design guidelines only applied to properties that were seeking the NEZ incentives. So if you were just doing a regular build without getting NEZ incentives, you didn't have to meet the guidelines. And this ensures that new builds reflect the most positive attributes of the neighborhood. And it encourages infill as well. Next slide. The land uses that the design guidelines are for is for single family, multifamily, commercial, institutional, mixed use, and industrial. And to this point, I think that we've only had single family. I actually used to review for these design guidelines. And while I was reviewing for them, I'd only seen single family applications. And this is an example of how we use the design guidelines. Basically, what we did was we created a booklet that had all of the different standards, examples, the actual standard, and then examples of what to do and what not to do that we felt was easier for the general public and for reviewers to understand how to build within Como. Along with those design guidelines, we created a checklist. That checklist was meant to provide a quick, brief one-pager of, does your project meet this? If it doesn't, let's figure out what we need to do. So this example was just for a single family building within Como, but I'm not sure if this one actually was built. It was an example that was provided by Habitat for Humanity. And as you can see, I went along through the different questions, and all of them are based off of questions. And it's either a yes or a no. Do they meet it? Do they not? If they do, then they get the points. If they don't, then they don't get the points. A couple of them are NAs because they're like for a corner lot. And not every building can be a corner lot. And so in the end, this particular design did meet all the requirements. And we do require a score of 75 points in order to receive the any of the incentives. So this one did meet it because it got 80. And we do that for all of them. And next slide. Sorry, and I'm going to turn it over to Dorothy DeBose to talk about the community engagement.
Good morning, and thank you, Corey. Como has always been a very engaging community. I think it started with inception where we had all the churches, the pastors would get together and talk about the common problems in Como. And that evolved into the neighborhood, creating what we call a neighborhood council that meets once a month and have great participation where they come out and we address any major issues for the community. It's also been an avenue for us to build up great relationships and partners. I think our strong relationship with the city and the department heads has really helped us. It's been a great relationship. I think that was one of the reasons that we got that new center, because we were involved with them and with that long-term relationship. We built up relationships with the North Texas Legal Service, where they have come into the community and have done educations with the community on looking at wills, how to make sure that we reduce the number of properties that are foreclosed due to tax. So that's been a wonderful relationship. The working with them, they also helped us with our 501c3. And even though it's in its infancy, it's starting off well, because we are now working with various banks and getting I think it's our second matching grant. But because of those partnerships and because of our community involvement, and let me just talk about that involvement. That monthly meeting on Thursday is open to all the residents of Como. We do everything in English and Spanish now. And I think because we have had that great relationship with the city, that helped us with getting the $3.1. And I know it was a great push for the streetscape. We continue to want to preserve our heritage. It's important to us that we maintain our community history. So we have worked very hard to come up with a way that we can get designation for our cemetery. We have got the historic for that. We are also looking at getting a designation for our Como Elementary and high school, although it's not a high school anymore, it's a Como Montessori. But we're looking at our famous bluebirds, and there are a couple of more churches that we're looking at to be historic. Our relationship with the public art has been one of those where they helped us with our plan for our park. And one of the things that you see is the monument that they're putting in our park to represent we had a newspaper. It was run by Mr. Wilburn. He was the editor. And so it's to recognize him, and to Amon Carter, who donated the land for our park. So that's just one of the relationships with the Art Council, but there are other deals. But I think that when you look at it, Como continues to meet, address problems, and then bring to the table those that can help us move forward. And with the streetscape project, it really comes back to our history, because I grew up in this neighborhood and it was always a friendly neighborhood where you walked, Horn Street was the place. You didn't have a lot of places to go. So you walked up and down Horn Street, you could go and get, they had a Dairy Queen, so you could go and get hamburgers and drinks. So the Horn Street project will bring that what we used to be like, all of the walk-in and seeing families working together. And the improvements in our park is one of the areas that we are addressing. So I think that working with the city and them allowing Katrina to work with us to develop our strategic plan was one of the greatest, I think one of our greatest achievements, because laying out that plan has helped us realize how we can move forward and sustain and continue to revitalize our community. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Our third presenter today is Rick Leisner. He's a principal at Norris Design. Rick has more than 35 years of experience in planning and design, working on large-scale projects across a range of communities. His projects include urban planning, visioning, and implementation strategies. Rick, we're ready for your presentation on Bobcat Trail at Traditions Field Master Plan.
Carolyn, I want to thank you very, very much. I appreciate this opportunity. Hopefully the use of this microphone is making our audio much better than without.
Yes, definitely.
Excellent, thank you. Good morning, everybody. We'd like to basically run through our Bobcat Trail at Traditions Field Master Plan. We've had the wonderful opportunity to work with the city of Salina on this project. The city hired Norris Design back in 2019. This actually is an early action component as it relates to the city's trail master plan completed and adopted in 2018. Next slide. Let me just briefly give you, I'm sorry, Carolyn, why don't you back up just one? Yeah, that'll be good. I'm just going to give just a quick little overview on Norris Design, just so everybody has an understanding. We're a consulting firm that has planning, landscape architecture, and branding. We have 8 offices across the country, and we're roughly 170 professionals. I am in our Dallas office, and we're quite proud to be in the state of Texas in 2 locations, Dallas and Austin. And again, we've been working with the city of Salina extensively over the last probably 3 years on many of their master planning efforts. Next slide. This is just a quick summation of many of our projects here within the firm. Again, we do an awful lot of work with municipalities in these different 3 states that we're located, and those parks and recreation and planning departments. Next slide. Let's fast forward and take a look here at the visuals to the Bobcat Trail Master Plan. In essence, this is a plan that was created along Doe Branch Creek, a small creek that runs about six urban blocks in a diagonal fashion adjacent to the downtown Salina area. The existing character of the area is some underutilized parcels, some residential lots that distantly back up to the creek, some commercial development up there to the north that actually backs to the creek and has no openings or engagement with the creek at all. And then toward the center of this plan, you see the Salina football field. At one time, the city of Salina and the Salina Independent School District, this was its football stadium, the only football stadium for both varsity, junior varsity football, soccer played here. Well, the Salina has moved and expanded their facility, so this area currently has not been used for several years. So it is clearly an opportunity and a program component in the new master plan. And within this plan, we'll talk about how we're able to take a football field that they have given the wonderful name of Traditions Field, and we're looking at turning it into a citywide amphitheater that to where we can have celebrations along this area. The master plan includes trails along both sides. Let's jump into the existing conditions of the corridor a little bit more. This gives you an image here that looks at that adjacent commercial property that literally turns its back on this wonderful natural amenity. We'll be proposing to open up this building, provide outdoor dining, and again with the pedestrian trails and cleaning the creek up slightly. This will be a tremendous economic development opportunity for this portion of the northern area of Bobcat Trail. Next slide. Much of the corridor, this is kind of a typical image. The trail will be set just slightly above the creek elevation. The desire is to maintain and preserve as much of the existing tree cover and canopy as we can, clearly wanting to keep it more of a natural amenity within the community and allowing it to help be that catalyst for future recreational and residential development. Next slide. The area to the south along the corridor, down in the southern reaches of the study area, there's currently been some grading that has occurred to try to lessen the opportunity for flooding in this area. It's sad that this had to happen because you can clearly see that they took away a lot of the existing vegetation and you have a much different type of environment. So in this area of the creek, the trail master plan will look at including a lot of additional new landscape and pedestrian improvements and possibly also impounding the water in some small areas to create a little bit more amenity with the water. Next slide. Some of the master plan components. The first one we're looking at here is an illustrative rendering. The design is looking at trying to create an 8 to 10 foot wide trail along both sides of the trail. Again, we're wanting to preserve that mature canopy cover. We're wanting to promote the area as a natural refuge area for bird watching. There's several pedestrian bridges along the corridor to where we're able to connect both sides. So again, the opportunity for this to be enhanced habitat for animals and birds, and also allowing pedestrians and neighbors to come over and use this area as a real amenity for the community. Next slide. Here we're looking at some of the pollinator plantings. There's going to be a pollinator garden toward the southern end of the master plan. There will be a community garden to where vegetables and fruit will be able to be grown also by different neighborhood groups and citizens. So clearly, this is a master plan that looks at uniting the neighborhood together, bringing neighbors together for passive and active recreational uses along the corridor. Next slide. Salina has a wonderful history, and this master plan is able to embellish and enhance that history. On one side of the corridor, there's this historic marker that talks about the historic black school that used to be located on this site within the historic black neighborhood, which was on one side of the creek. As you look at this slide, you can see across the creek and see those athletic buildings that was adjacent to the football field. So both of these neighborhoods were knitted together along the Bobcat Trail master plan. Our desire to enhance this neighborhood, next slide please, looks at proposing and to propose a larger public park. We're wanting to bring about a marker and some designations of where that historic black school used to be. We would also like to identify the foundation and the footing so we can tell the story of the community and the growing and the enhancement of that community through a public park and public amenities along Bobcat Trail. One of the stories we had, I'm sorry, Carolyn, was one of the neighbors who came out and talked to us about the neighborhood. We were so happy to get a photograph of him adjacent to the sign. He told us about much of the history of the neighborhood and how in the 50s and 60s, the community used to have picnics for the neighborhood, and many of those items he thinks would be welcomed and enjoyed today. Next slide, please. Here we're taking a look at the current Salina High School football stadium. Again, this used to be the place of many of the community's celebrations for many sports, football, soccer. The band would play here. Many of the citizens in this fast-growing community used to play sports or participated or viewed in events at this stadium. So one of the components that we're very much excited about is preserving this field. Next slide, please. And turning it into an overflow area for the new Salina amphitheater. This amphitheater could have different types of programmed events. It would be kind of the cultural outdoor hub of the community. And of course, this football field surface actually provides a wonderful lawn environment for people to spread blankets out and put up chairs and also listen and participate in the performance that might be happening in the amphitheater, along with using the existing seating on one side of that football. So again, this will be quite an amenity for this young and growing active community. Next slide. Again, that notion of being able to preserve the traditions within what we're now calling Traditions Field, the history of the community, the many state champions that were won here by the soccer teams and football teams. Friday night football is alive and well here in the state of Texas, and clearly it has been a great component of Salina's history. Next slide. As we start to look at the importance of this master plan, you start to envision and sense the opportunities for new growth and development to occur along its perimeters and into the neighborhood as it grows toward the downtown area. There are opportunities for adjacent commercial development. We're looking at Preston Road is the major corridor there over on the east side that just barely touches the northern end of Bobcat Trail in this master plan. Clearly, this master plan will have opportunities for catalysts, for creating catalyst retail and commercial development in that location. We would also like to see new residential development. And that development, of course, could have a range of different densities. So again, the opportunities for growth and development along this community amenity is quite impressive. Next slide. Those land use opportunities have been projected with a range of densities, looking at more of a town mixed use development. You can see there toward the middle of the corridor, just adjacent to one of the pedestrian bridges. We would like to see some mixed use development with ground floor retail and professional services, possibly with residential above. And then we start to see a range of residential developments that then work its way toward the downtown area that's approximately about 7 to 8 blocks away to the west. So a significant opportunity for new development along this master plan. Next slide. Here we're starting to look at some of the imagery that we would like to see some of this new development begin to encourage the mixed use pattern of use on the image on the bottom, and we then start to see some of the adjacent, some of the other residential development in either 2 or 3 story types of uses. Next slide. Much of the development could take on a quasi-historic type of imagery and pattern with strong relationships to the street and access, public sidewalks tying Bobcat Trail Master Plan into the adjacent development and further development as it reaches into the community. Next slide. We also know that there'll be a pattern for townhouse and patio uses. Much of this use and these residential components could be both for sale opportunities and also for rental opportunities. Next slide. Traditions Field, as you can see, is one of the center catalysts for the development. And then again, a more walkable pattern of development runs along both sides of the community with all access points wanting to connect you back into Bobcat Trail and those opportunities for recreational uses and enjoyment of the natural environment that will be preserved along this master plan. Next slide. This is an image of the existing character in downtown Salina. Again, the opportunities to link both of these developments, the downtown with the Bobcat Trail Master Plan is tremendous. We had the opportunity to have some public meetings in developing the Trail Master Plan with citizens, and they talked about the opportunities of having family types of opportunities for outdoor recreation, connecting many of the amenities and new development within the community is one of the important factors they would like to see more of in the community. Next, please. And then again, I'd just like to walk through some of the components that are included in this master plan. Again, that Salina Traditions Field there where the football field is, that becomes one of the larger venues within this trail master plan, as it would serve as that amphitheater for the community. The Bobcat Trail pedestrian loop with a 10-foot walking trail on both sides with at least 2 pedestrian bridges crossing the creek. We're calling those Unity pedestrian bridges. There's also opportunities for interpretive signage that will talk about the history of the Black community and also new development in the area. We know that that's vitally important in the redevelopment of this area. The pollinator gardens are vitally important, along with the community garden for growing natural and native food locally. Exercise garden is an important component that many of the citizens wanted, would be up there in number 10 toward the northern end, which again would provide opportunity for outdoor exercising and enjoyment for all ages. A parking area would be centrally located and would allow people to park in one location and then be able to enjoy many of the access and recreational components. The dog park is item number 13, along with a splash pad for kids that would actually be a signature component within the master plan, which would bring that outdoor water experience. Gateway signage and future phases goes both to the north and to the south. And then again, this master plan provides that catalyst component for new infill development of both recreational and commercial development. Next, please. We'd like to thank COG for the CLIDE Award on this development, the Bobcat Trail at Traditions Field Master Plan. The city of Salina was extremely important in providing the development of the program items and the different components that they were much wanting to include within this development. Next, please. This is just a quick photo of many of the team members. Of course, we would have to start off by having a big thanks to Mayor Sean Terry, and the City Council for working with the city manager for allowing us the opportunity to put this master plan into a physical vision. Many of these individuals, both from from the city and from the Economic Development Department have provided a significant role in allowing us opportunities to meet with people within the city to help us program the area to then understand the different types of design components. So we at Norris Design would like to thank the city extremely for this opportunity to work together, and we are very proud of the award, as I know the city of Salina is also. Next slide. That ends our presentation for today. We would be more than happy to answer any questions about this project and the process to develop it. Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you, Rick. So that concludes our 3 presentations for today. At this time, if you have any questions for any of our presenters, you can either type your question in the chat box or raise your hand. You could also turn on your camera and raise your hand if you wanted to. Unmute your microphone, and if you do verbally state it, if you do that, please state your name so that we know who you are. I see somebody is typing, so may have a question. While that is coming up, John, there was a comment in our chat. There were no questions about your presentation, but great job by the city and Better Block. Makes the community a favorable place for future restaurants, and she looks forward to many tasty meals in Farmers Branch.
I think I probably typed that one.
And then Caroline says no questions, but she's very impressed with everyone's effort. Thank you for sharing. Before we go, I'd like to point out some of the items on our Center for Development Excellence website, since we did spend quite a bit of time updating this. What you see on the screen right now is our CLIDE Award winners. Again, what we did is CLIDE Awards are every 2 years. So we have tabs across the top for each of the year winners. And there's a point on the map so you'll know where each item is located. And you can click on them and get more information about the specific items. We do have some additional resources on our website. We just recently updated a bunch of those. You are more than welcome to take a look at those. We hope that you find them useful. If there's anything that you think we need to add to our website, please let me know. I will be happy to vet those. We also have some case studies that we've been adding to our library of case studies. And the previous CLIDE winners, you saw that. We do still have, for the 2021 CLIDE Awards, we do still have up the jury members, so you can see who was on our jury for this year. We also have started putting some indicators on our website, regional indicators, which are metrics used to gauge progress made in North Texas. So we have several on population density, commute mode, housing diversity. Our goal is to update those on a regular basis. I won't say exactly how often. It varies depending on the indicator. But those are also available on our website. We do have 2 different activities that the Center for Development Excellence spearheads. One is our Lego visioning exercise, which is based on our 2050 Vision North Texas plan, where we come out and provide a map and the Legos needed to do some future development plans based on the numbers that we have on future growth. And so we talk about, where are these people going to go? Where are they going to live? Where do they work? How do they get there? And it's designed to spark group discussion and looking at ways to handle various issues in our area for growth. Charm for us is new. We actually haven't posted anything yet because we were going to do it last year, and COVID put a pin in that for us. So Charm is new to us. We will be starting that later. Our goal is to start doing presentations with Charm, doing activities with Charm in the spring of 2022. It is an interactive tool where you use a laptop and statistics on population, jobs, water use, and when you make a change, it updates on the screen. And one of the issues is water quality. For example, you can look just at water quality. Corey, you're right. It is an amazing tool. Like I said, our goal was to start using it last year, and COVID decided that that wasn't going to be for us. So thank you very much for our presenters for making such great presentations today. Thank you to everybody who listened in. Just a reminder, my name's Carolyn Horner. My information is there on the screen. And also with the Center for Development Excellence, we have Tamara Cook and Edith Marvin in our Environment and Development Department. Thank you again. And with that, I have nothing else, and we can finish just a few minutes early for lunch.
Awesome.